Hi, and welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is how to build enduring great companies. I'm Brad Giles, and I'm joined today by my co-host, as always, Kevin Lawrence. G'day, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome today, Brad. I decided to set up in a different room today. So I was thinking I could sit here and enjoy the view. And then I realized that it's dark. So much for that theory, but it's always good to try new things. But otherwise, I'm having a great day so far.
Good. End of the day for you. Beginning of the day for me. We always are being on opposite sides of the planet. We're always in an opposite time zone. And so, yeah, good to see that you're doing well. So tell me, what do we have on this show today? What's on our mind?
Well, we're going to talk about RACI. Now, not racing, huh? Don't get excited, you motorsports fans or bicycle fans or other types of fans that like to see things compete. But this is RACI, RACI, and it's all about accountability and responsibility and getting clarity about who is involved in what way in important decisions or important projects. It's an area that gets real messy sometimes. Yes, Brad, you have an interesting thing to add in.
No, definitely not interesting. So it's not. It's not racism, and it's not racy as
Nope.
in wearing skimpy clothes. It's
Nope.
different.
So it's not about cars, motorcycles, bicycles being disrespectful to other people or wearing less than the normal amount of clothes someone would wear. It's none of those things.
Okay, that's the different podcast, not today's one.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find that somewhere. It just isn't going to be here today.
Okay, so it's a problem that we come across all the time in any, not so much even in companies, but any group of people really. And who is accountable for something is the kind of primary question. You get a group of people that come together, you get a group of people where things need to be done, and we look to understand who is the person who will be accountable for it. So RACI is a tool around that. So maybe do we want to begin by explaining what the definition of RACI is?
We could actually, I was even thinking maybe we could start with talking what happens when it's not clear.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, so we just had our team retreat this past weekend, and thankfully most of us got to be in person, not all. And it was even because we were staying in a house and working in a place, and it was even like figuring out meals. Now, you're going to eat when you're at a retreat. But what we did is different people, different meals. Well, who's accountable for that? Who's responsible? So we had a situation where two people were paired up to make breakfast, for example. Well, some people were figuring out what the breakfast would be. Somebody else was doing the shopping. And then there was the people that were preparing. And then there was those that were eating. But even if you look at something as simple as that, you get a bunch of people involved, it can kind of get confusing, and you don't want someone not to bring the eggs.
Yeah.
And as simple as it could be from simple things in life, or, if you're booking a family vacation, and you don't need to break out the RACI at the dinner table with your family. But if you're booking a family vacation, it's just making sure that someone booked the flights when we flew away for vacation, that is. Someone booked the hotel, someone got the rental car or the transport between the airport and the hotel.
Yeah.
It's just knowing that the right things were packed and someone got the pass. It's, in our everyday lives, it's a little easier to figure out because usually there's someone who will do it. But if you get into a bigger group of people, it gets real confusing real fast.
Yeah.
Real fast. So can you think of some real live examples, Brad, where it's been like a RACI gone wrong?
Well, I guess RACI, if we start with the real basics, we've got the simple formula, or the simple question is, what's the difference between responsibility and accountability? And then we can move to the next level of complexity or clarification, which is RACI. So multiple people can be responsible for something, but only one person can be accountable. And just that, introducing that really simple sentence into a leadership team as a behavioral expectation can be really powerful and important, because suddenly people go, oh, so if my name is against something, I need to do this project, then that means that that person is the one who will come back and deliver it. That is the person who will come back and say, yes, it's done, or no, it's not done. So just beginning with the understanding for everybody on the team, what's the difference between responsibility versus accountability? So to your question, we had an example in Australia here, an extreme example of that in the last, I would say the last week or two. And so in Victoria, we've had a COVID-19 outbreak, and the city of Melbourne and the state of Victoria, to a lesser degree, went into lockdown for, it must have been 6 or 8 weeks, somewhere around there. The whole city shut down. You can't leave your house, all of the things that we know. And that they had, before that, after the first wave, this was their second wave, they had quite an extended period between the first and second wave where things were kind of going okay. There was, maybe 10 or 20 cases a day. It was well and truly under control. They were bringing travelers, international travelers from overseas, and then putting them into hotel quarantine for 14 days, as we've seen around the world. And that became a problem, and that project didn't work as they intended, and subsequently they went up to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases a day, which led to the second wave, the second outbreak, because this wasn't there. So long story short, there was a government inquiry into why did this happen, and you've got many people from within the government who were saying, well, we thought this was a shared responsibility. We thought that several different government people and government departments were all responsible for it. And that really got me thinking at the time, that's the problem that we see in management teams, in leadership teams all the time, which is, well, who's actually accountable for it? So I suppose my point is, this can happen at any group of people, right to the top of government. This is not just a small issue.
So it could be your family on who was going to make the dinner reservation or book the transfer from the airport to the hotel. This can be a government. This can be any group of people, but in companies in particular, this is where it shows up a lot. And it shows up in many different ways. But what's interesting is, sometimes people, well, why can't two people be accountable? And we have that conversation a lot. And the saying I have is, if everyone's accountable, nobody's accountable.
Yes.
If two people are accountable, no one's accountable. Because here's what happens. And I'll go back to one of the clients I worked with, and it was a very important contract that they were signing. And the document was circulated out to 8 people. It was a large contract. And I was saying, hey, please review and provide any feedback. They even come to the meeting and the legal counsel says, hey, any feedback? And everyone's like, nope, looks good to me. And the truth is, when you dig underneath it, what was happening is psychologically, Frank thought Sam was going to look at it. Sam thought Sally was going to look at it. Sally thought George was looking at it. Everyone assumed everyone else was looking at it. No one read the damn contract.
Yeah.
Right? And then they find out later on, when they got themselves into trouble and there was tax issues and there was this issue, no one read it. Everyone just assumed it would be fine and it would be fine. And then the CEO signed it and assuming that all those people had gone through it. And because so basically is that even people, when you have multiple people accountable, people subconsciously think that the other person has it. the weight doesn't sit on their shoulders. Like the way I look at it is somebody should be losing sleep at night if it gets weird.
Yeah.
Right. But if the accountability isn't sitting on a single person, then it doesn't. And then weird things happen, like with that contract.
Yeah. The way that I position it in offsite strategic planning workshops is I say, well, who's going to be the person in the room that comes back in 90 days and says, okay, so this is done or it is not done? Like,
Yes.
who will be that person? That, because only one person can speak at once. Who will be that person? And just trying to narrow it down. And then eventually people get into the rhythm. But without some kind of framework, without some kind of understanding about the importance of single points of accountability, it's this, like you're stuck at the airport without a transfer, or the dinner reservation hasn't been made, or whatever, or there's a second COVID wave to go to an extreme.
Yes. And there's lots of cliches we can use here, but it's like someone needs to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Someone needs to own it. And that's why there's only one steering wheel in a car. Right?
Yeah.
Unless it's driving school. That's a different one. They got a backup steering wheel because they don't quite trust the person that's supposed to be accountable just yet. But it makes it easier for people if it's clear. And so there's this model called RACI, and we did our research into where does it come from. We've used it in lots of clients, particularly bigger clients. It becomes common when it gets more complicated. And we always have it was invented back in the 50s, and it's got all kinds of different offshoots from it. And I pulled out one. There's even one called Cairo, like Egypt. And they flipped all the letters around. What does it say? This Cairo. There's Paris. There's Cairo. There's Rapid. Let's go to Cairo first of all, just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Cairo is RACI scrambled around with an O added into out of the loop or omitted for people who are not part of it at all. It's almost saying, who's excluded or who's not part of it. And let's go to Paris just for fun. Paris, so we have responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. That's what RACI is for accountability. And Paris is participant accountable, review required, input required, sign off required. So that's a whole of them. You don't need to go to Cairo or Paris. You just stick with RACI. It's real simple. But Brad, let's go through and give the definitions, and then we can give a whole bunch of uses, because like, I'll tell you what, this comes up a lot. And before we get into the one I see a lot is people who are supposed to only be consulted thinking that they're responsible or even co-accountable. So said differently, we want to get their input, but they have nothing to do with the decision or with making of the decision. And it's like asking them, what color do you want the walls to be? And they say purple, and someone else says green, and another person says white, and you say thank you. Yes. And you may complete, and then they might be blue. And they have to go, okay, it wasn't, and they can't come fighting. I wanted this, because it's a disciplined way to have debates and make decisions.
Well, it's not your role, is it? And that's part of
my role. I'm important in this company. I need to be a part of this. I've been running this department for years. You need to listen. I've got whatever the reason is. Yes.
But that's important, because underlying that's important, because underlying that, and I've seen this before, is people who are trying to gather resources, trying to gather power in companies, and they want to have their name against a lot of things.
Yes, that's a side of it, Brad.
It's the opposite to the first thing, which is, in the first instance, you said, everybody.
Not my problem.
Not my problem. Yeah. In the first instance, you said, well, I thought that person was taking care of it. I thought that person was taking care of it. In this case, it's a grab for power. So that's why the clarification is so important.
Critical.
It's
Well,
so
and there's two
important.
things, Brad. I've seen grabs for power.
Mm,
I've seen people really, truly, deeply caring that aren't power hungry.
mm-hmm.
And I've also seen, and I worked in one very large group for a while. It's, whoa, that looks risky. I don't want to
Yeah.
touch it. And avoiding accountability or responsibility. I remember seeing the CFO of a very large group, when it would come to sign off on big important projects,
Mm-hmm.
he'd make sure he never signed anything, never recommended anything. So we had to pin the A on the damn forehead. I'm exaggerating. But he should have been accountable, but he was a smart corporate guy who always tried to find a way not to, because
Yeah.
if it was risky and went bad, it wouldn't come back to him.
Yeah.
So there's cases where you got to go and actually hang it on them so that they are accountable and they know it and we all know it. It's all over the map sometimes. But that one in particular, always, I'm like, wow, this guy's really sharp.
Yeah.
You know?
Because risk, and that's perhaps more, in my experience as well, more in larger organizations, you get the risk averse people who want to avoid accountability.
Yeah.
Go
Or
on.
people who are afraid of failing. And even in
Yeah.
smaller orgs, sometimes some people don't want to put their neck out.
Yeah.
And they'll they'll try and not be, and they'll try and slide out of it. That's why, in the world we have this thing called a who, what, when, an action log from a meeting. So you can really nail things down, because some people do, try and slide out of it. But we can get some examples of it. Let's go and just define the RACI really, really well.
Yeah. So,
And
responsible is number one. So the person assigned to do the work. Accountable is number two. The person who makes the final decision and has the ultimate ownership. C is consulted. The person who must be consulted before a decision or action is taken. And then informed. The person who must be informed that a decision or action has been taken. So there are different roles there. And just like you mentioned about Paris and Cairo, this is just one of the many, many different versions. And, I would invoke the rule of best practice. And this is one form of best practice. The role of the listeners is to interpret how to make best practice work best in your organization. And
yep.
so I think with the SMART acronym, there's like 91 different versions of SMART and what they mean. Okay. So find the one that works the best for you. This is the one that we've got to talk about today. So this isn't the right or the wrong one. It's just the one that we're talking about today.
Yeah. And it's the best one I have seen that is within RACI. You could come up with other acronyms, but this is a damn good one.
Yeah.
If you find something else, at the end of the day, it's about agreeing on it and knowing who is responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. And let me give an example. We were in a company recently and debating something that had to do with an investment in the operations part of the business. And you could argue that all the executives have a vested interest, and the best executive teams, to some degree, at their best, you might not even need this.
Yeah.
Because the best teams, they want to debate things and they debate it until they agree. And so basically in the good times, you need this slightly less on some things. In the bad times, you really need it to help kind of hold it all together, like kind of being like the glue that holds it together. So in this thing, as we're talking about this, and we're talking about the investment operations, I think it was the head of finance, I believe it was the head of finance, if I remember correctly, head of finance said, well, from a finance perspective, this is important for this reason and this reason, and we don't agree about this. And the CEO nicely said at some point, yes, I hear you, and that's good. I want to get all of your perspectives. And at the end of the day, we've got to make the right decision for the business.
Yeah.
Now, the CEO probably won't make the CEO because it's a capital investment. The CEO Let me clarify this. Did we decide that they were accountable, or is the head of ops accountable? Mm, In this case, we decided the head of operations was actually accountable because they had the ownership for it.
Mm-hmm.
But because it involved capital, getting cash for it.
Yeah.
But the ultimate execution of the final decision of what to do was the head of operations. But the capital of whether or not we had a the capital was between the CFO and the CEO.
So, what was the CEO's role in that? Was the CEO responsible, consulted, or informed?
Consulted as part of it.
Yeah.
But the head of operations was making the final decision because this has already been approved in
Yep.
the capital plan and was already in the budget. But in the discussion, you would never know it.
Yeah.
Because the CEO and most great CEOs don't exert their power or exert their authority. CEO can essentially override anything in the business.
Yeah.
The best CEOs let the execs and their teams make almost every decision.
I could not agree more. And that's when I first start working with a team, and I know it's the same for you. It's that's one of the big sort of light bulb moments. Is that what I say to them is we're democratizing the decision making process, and the leaders often don't believe that it's possible, or they don't believe that they can do it, or they can trust people. And then once they've been through a few iterations, they're like, this is the best thing ever. Like, we've got people who are accountable and they're actually working on the right things. I've just multiplied my capabilities throughout the whole team. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. The from a human factor, like the relief that they get. But that comes about because people take accountability so many times, and I guess it's the same for you. So many times, I'm in a leadership team meeting, and someone says, "Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that with Rob. Like, we'll do that together." And I'm just like, "Oh, hang on, time out. We can't do it together. Like, we need only one person." And they think that I'm just being pedantic, but it all comes back to, unless we can define it, Now, the only time I've seen that is when I work with a couple of companies who've got, they're kind of like two companies in one leadership team, if that makes sense. So we've got, for example, two operations managers, and this person's going to roll out the new operations marketing strategy for that business and then that business. So
yes,
there's a little bit of leeway there to a degree, but it's
like anything. 99% of the time you follow this exactly.
Yeah.
And if you do 99%, you're good. I've had rare situations, and we do everything possible where you have co-heads on something. Because you have similar two people in different parts of an organization, or two people in organizations that are working almost like parallel organizations in the same company. And there might be times when you'd have, even then, we try and say, okay, but which one of you is going to take the lead this time?
Yeah.
Right. And 99.9% we get one, but there's been the odd time it's two. It just should be an exception and not a normal thing for there to be two people. So let's take an example. So the responsible, usually that's fairly clear in most companies who's going to do the work.
Yeah.
Most of the time. The accountability, who the ultimate decision maker, is hard, especially it gets bigger, and they'll be fighting over that sometimes. But the ultimate decision maker and the person who has to make sure it works. The consultant is interesting because lots of people on important stuff want to be consulted. And then some people don't want to consult people. Those power hungry ones in particular, or busy and forgetful, but not consulting somebody important on a critical decision is really, interestingly, I am a C or consulted on a lot of key decisions with our clients. I have no accountability. I have no decision-making power or ownership power of things within companies. I generally am not responsible in doing the work, but I make sure, and I will regularly ask to be consulted or on the C. Because, like I said to the CEO today, my job is to challenge the thinking of the decision right up and point to the point the decision's made. Once the decision's made, my job is to help find us ways to win. But I put myself into a C role and want to be in that C role a lot. Mm-hmm. Because there's perspectives I have from all others, like you do, perspectives I have from a lot of other companies. And sometimes when people are trying to jam things through a system, or they're just too busy, it's not always malicious. The consultant part gets skipped a lot. And it's really, really important. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have my name against things in the same way that you've just described, but I love what you've said there, because I am actually consulted through that.
Yeah, sorry. I don't, you won't see it on the plans, but
okay.
It's a note to the exec. Like one place it is, but I try not to be that much, but I make sure that I am consulted and I get an agreement. I'll take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just through the decision-making process, when it's all being debated, probably like yourself, so often I'll be saying, well, like, I've seen that 7 times before. Let's just have a phone call about that before you lock that in. And I'll give you a interesting or different perspective, throw some more options that will help you to make a better decision or have more confidence in the decision that you make. Again, I'm not accountable, but I'm certainly consulted. Yeah.
Yep. So in a minute, I think we should run through a couple of examples, but let's say on the informed that have maybe gone well or not gone well, or we're just, a case study example. But on the informed, there's people that have to be informed. And a lot of times this gets missed, especially on decisions, when something gets decided and that person isn't in the meeting, and whether they're need to be informed because it's appropriate, or they need to be informed because they have some execution accountability. That gets missed a lot too. And there's people that sometimes are just, that are forgotten in the process. Yeah. And then we might make a perfect decision, but key people are out of the loop and it makes a big mess.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's drilling down going back to the beginning, the simple principle to understand and accept is that you can't have more than one person accountable for something. But then this really drills down into the different layers or the different roles, and that you can't just have one area that you would be. So what are some examples that come to mind where you've seen RACI perhaps successful, or perhaps an absence, meaning a lack of success?
Yeah. And usually this happens when there's people involved from different parts of a business.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just within your direct team that you talk to and work with every day. So new product development is something where it's very common. So with new product development, there's lots of different inputs that would come into it. Lots of people might be consulted. And even if you new product development, when you get to the final phase and you're about to launch it, I mean, you pretty well need to consult the entire organization, because there's huge ramifications and you might not see something. Yeah. And you might need money and you got to talk to finance about that. It might make a difference to logistics, or you might need to, have legal involved, or operations, or sales and marketing if it has anything to do with the customer. So new product development as a specific thing that cuts across the business.
Yeah.
But even in quarterly goals, some of our clients do it diligently. Some, it's just they don't have an issue with it. But the ones where it gets messy, they will build whatever that goal, a quarterly goal or quarterly rock, they'll build an action plan and they'll have a RACI on it. They'll just attach it, and it makes it really easy, so that they don't have the wrong people involved, or if they're missing people in it in the wrong way. So I've seen it there. I've seen it like almost everything. When again, um, we always have who's accountable
Yeah.
for delivering of we call a quarterly goal.
Yep.
Always have the A, always, and then they'll make a list of other people. But we implement the RACI when we start to get problems, communication problems, even buy-in problems. You know, if we're not getting the right people involved up front in consulting them, it creates a issue with buy-in. So that's when we normally bring it in.
Yeah, what I tend to hear a lot of is people say, I'm gonna maybe not using these words. I'm gonna consult with, I'm gonna work with Rob on that goal. So Rob's accountable for the goal, but someone else is going to be saying, yeah, I'll have an input into that. Like, and so this is a really good framework to accurately define that role and to be able to know um, what what area will you work in. I remember there was a a team that I worked with, and there was two individuals, and they were adamant that they both had to take this on, and this is in that 0.1% that you mentioned. They there was a partially legitimate reason. It overlapped what they were doing, and I knew as I acknowledged that I wouldn't get away with it, but B, one of the two people was a bit power hungry, let's say, and as I knew, this person took it on, did the whole thing, and I don't even think the other person was barely consulted, but it was just the heat of the moment in the leadership team offsite, and then how that kind of panned through. So yeah, using a more formalized framework. I mean, yeah, it may have changed that situation. I don't know, but it's certainly something that we see on a regular basis.
Yep. And that's why larger companies or medium-sized companies end up using it, because it gets a bit messy for all kinds of different reasons with bigger groups of people. And predefining it and pre-agreeing to the RACI before we start helps us to not only be on track for doing a project, but at the very end, when we're evaluating it, people can, if we've agreed who would be responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, it can take away some of the chatter for people who aren't happy with the fact that they're not making the decision.
Yeah. So, what might be some best practices with RACI, do you think then? Like, what might be some ways, responsibility versus accountability and RACI, simply being able to nail down people to get people to understand their role? What do you think? I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind, perhaps?
Any big decision that is across different departments.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like some of the ones we've mentioned, new product development, things like marketing. People love to have input into marketing.
Yeah.
Sales likes to have input into marketing. Finance likes to everyone wants to have input. But at the end of the day, anywhere where there's friction about people wanting to take control too much or not take it enough are usually places that I have seen that this really helps, or where there's just good old confusion. And
you go on?
No, I see confusion, and personally, and it depends on the situation of the team, but often I'd like to define it up front if we're going to debate something, and really know, okay, well, at the end of the day, who's making the decision? What is the question or decision we're trying to make? Who else do we need to consult? Who are we going to have to inform later on? Who's responsible to get it done? You know, so but the thing we learn in all this stuff, Brad, is, you know, if you went in and applied every best practice in every situation possible, you're going to burden the organization. So this is about where is it needed, and we seeing lack of clarity or too much friction around accountability, I would suggest. But no matter what, always the A.
Yeah.
No matter what, A and accountability.
Definitely agree. Always know who is accountable for it. And every time you're going to make a decision or you're going to set a priority or a goal, who is accountable for it, one name only, I'd say that's absolutely best practice. And then as a secondary, I love what you said just then, and what we're trying to say is, this is a deeper way to analyze how, when we've got complexity. Again, best practice. How do we get best practice to work in the organization? It depends on the complexity of the question, of the situation that we've got to solve.
Yes.
So maybe the first kind of best practice is start with accountability and RACI. So if you're making a decision, say, who's accountable, and do we need a RACI on this or not? Can we just, is it complex enough?
Is it a high risk or high value? So I just remind me, one of my clients did a Salesforce implementation in one of the divisions and burnt about $5 million and did a lot of damage to the business.
Yeah.
What we found out afterwards is IT was responsible, accountable, consulted all themselves, and didn't inform anybody. Actually, the truth is they were responsible and accountable. They didn't consult and they didn't inform, and they built a piece of crap.
And the salespeople would have hated it.
Exactly. It didn't work for the salespeople or the customers, but they got a really nice award from Salesforce. I think that's what happens when you spend a lot of money. No, seriously. I now have a flag. When you get a big award from your software vendor, be careful. I've seen it a few times. Anyways, it was the company. I am not blaming Salesforce or the integration company who made a lot of money on it, but they internally had passionate IT people who thought they could do it. Maybe they were lacking time. I don't know. But whatever it is, they built a piece of crap that didn't work from the business because they didn't consult the business near enough. And this happens all the time. Those are hard projects. Same with any ERP or CRM. The chance of them failing is really high. And this doesn't guarantee it's fixed, but it helps.
One of the companies I used to own was an IT software company. You just sent a shiver down my spine, because I think about one of the projects that we did that cost us a lot of money and a lot of time. And it was the first of its type. It was, the next generation. It was the largest one in the Southern Hemisphere. And we burned a heap of cash and we won an award for it. And I'm thinking, that's the unwritten rule that I've just learned. So thanks for that. Who said you don't learn anything on the Growth Whisperers, eh?
Yeah. So we got kind of three things we want to leave you with today. With your key decisions or key projects, big things that go across your business, start with a RACI. It just makes it way easier. And that way, you don't forget key people that need to be involved, or you don't waste the time of people who don't need to be involved or consulted in this case.
Yeah.
Educate your team on the difference between them. Responsible and accountable are very different things. And you'll hear people saying, well, if I'm going to be accountable, I need to be responsible too, which is helpful in a lot of cases. Go ahead,
But
Brad.
not just your leadership team, the whole team. So even down to your frontline workers to know the difference.
Yes, it's in the company. Exactly. And then just remember there's only one A, right? And there's multiple A's in accountable. Yes, there is. Multiple A's in accountable, but you only want one A, one name or one person accountable on any given thing.
Yeah.
Single point of accountability is the way to keep it clear, and it makes it easier for the people. So it's like you're not fighting for the steering wheel. There is only one steering wheel in the car, so you can't fight for it. And that's what we're really doing. That's the person that's accountable for getting us there. And the other people can, be a part of the ride. They can have a nap in the passenger seat, whatever it happens to be.
Awesome.
But it's having that single point of accountability.
Good chat. Awesome. So start with RACI. So, or accountability. Begin with, when you set a thing, know what it is. Number two, educate your team. And number three, there's only one person who can be accountable. Really simple, succinct, good lessons there, I think. So good chat. So who's going to close? Am I going to close, or are you going to close?
Yeah, you can wrap it up. And I just want to say is, hey, and it was really fun to talk about going to Paris and Cairo for a few minutes. That whole thing of travel is this fascinating idea.
Yeah.
So I'll wrap up. So thanks, Mace. Thanks for listening. And this has been the Growth Whispers, as it is every week, with Brad, and I'm Kevin. And so for video, go to youtube.com and the Growth Whispers. And for Brad, evolutionpartners.com.au. And for myself, Kevin, lawrenceandco.com. Have an awesome week.